So tonight we're talking about legacy. Um, let's hit the intro.
This is not a show and might not even be a connection. Here's Judah and Guest.
Judah and Guest, and I'm here with Captain Blackburn. Ooh, you have blue eyes. I don't think I ever realized you had blue eyes.
Yeah, they're blue.
Ah, well. The captain look. Arg. We already have Scott in the viewership giving us a thumbs up. Hey, Scott.
Big
Good
G.
to
Paul
see you.
Scott. Good to see you, Scott.
Yeah,
He's,
man.
He's a big
What
granddad.
a good guy. That's right. You saw that.
I did see that.
He just
in my scrolling, in my ADD moment, I was like, so that's cool. And then, should hit the like button a little,
It's so awesome.
But I figured
Beautiful
he'd
daughter.
be around and I could say it, on video.
That's right. Yeah. Well, congratulations, Scott.
Congratulations.
And it falls into something that we're talking about right now, and that is the idea of legacy. What comes to your mind when you think of legacy, Josh?
Well, it's kind of, we're still in the fall season and we just can't get away from talking about death. Because it's kind of like a testament. Like legacy is what you leave behind, right? Like legacy is what, obviously, people think about legacy in the terms of wealth or plaques or names on bricks. I guess I'm entering that stage in my life where I'm really starting to give some more thought to, like, what am I going to leave behind when I die? That will be a piece of me. Like, that will be like my impression on my children, on the world around me. Legacy. So
where does that word come from? Legacy, legend. I don't know.
I didn't look that one up.
I should effort that, but the I agree. It's what legacy. It's what continues after we do, right?
Correct.
Would that be a good way of saying it? What is legacy?
Yeah, like what's the inheritance that we leave behind? And thinking of, and for me, it's like I don't expect, though I suppose that it's possible, like between now and the time of my demise, I might be able to amass some form of wealth. But more importantly, I think I kind of hope that there might be some spiritual, cultural, intellectual legacy that I've yet to create. So, for me, it's also, I think, tied in with goals and purpose and trying to think of even like the present with the end in mind. Because, the end is going to be, well, I won't be here. And then what will be left? Like, once you take me out of the equation, what's left behind?
Well, and that comes down to one of the biggest struggles we have as humans. Do I matter? Right? If I'm taken out of the equation, are there any ripples?
Sure, absolutely. And how, or maybe I might even like hone it in a little more, but how do I matter?
Well, but what I think the struggle, though, is, will I matter? Or do I matter right now? I think that's man's fundamental struggle. Do I matter?
Do I have meaning? Do I have like weight, purpose? I use that word weight because value.
Weight. Well, yeah.
I like weight because like weight, like I'm going to blank and forget the Hebrew word for glory. Kabod.
Help us in the
kabod.
Okay.
Has this, as I remember it, this meaning about weight, like heaviness, substance. doxa, the Greek word for glory. It, maybe it has some of those overtones. I'd have to pull out Kittle's from. I'd have to go to a library and pull out, a theological dictionary. But
Well,
yeah, I like that word.
Wait,
Some
yeah, I like that
glory,
too.
some
weighty glory.
substance.
Yes. Well, so legacy from the online etymology dictionary says it's from late 14th century legaki, body of persons sent on a mission. That's fascinating to me. From the medieval
like a legate.
Latin legatia,
Yeah.
from the Latin legatus, ambassador, envoy, deputy. And really, what is our legacy other than our children? I mean,
Sure.
for those of us that
that's
have
the
children.
most obvious one, right? I mean, like if you have children,
Yeah.
that's the most immediate legacy.
Yeah.
Which, if I take a really humble look, I can hang my hat on. I do think my children are better human beings than I am, or at least they're better human beings than I was at their age. Probably, I think. I'm a little biased, and I hope at a minimum they're just better human beings than me.
I agree. Yeah. Well, it helps that I married a fantastic woman as far as goodness goes, and
that doesn't hurt. I'm with you. They're better halves for a reason.
There was only going up for me. So no, but she has brought it way up here to where, it's at that place where my kids do not swear because they want to be more like mommy and less like daddy.
That's not a bad thing.
I'm the negative example, right? I gotta show them what not to be.
What approach? Right?
No, that's one approach. That's not the right approach, but sometimes ends up being like that. But yeah, I mean, that reminded me of Scott's granddaughter and having that legacy. What is is it the word progeny? Progeny, is that the word for the people that come after you?
People could come from you. I mean, progen.
From you. Yeah.
The
people that come from you.
Come
right.
forth. Yeah.
And you know what? It makes me incredibly sad is when I find out about families that, I think maybe we've talked about this a little bit, but I've talked a lot about this with Chanda because she comes from a little bit of a contentious family. It's on, in some areas, not the whole family. We get along well I get along well with my father-in-law and our mother-in-law. They're in different areas of the world, but their respective spheres, I get along fine with them. Actually, I love them a lot. But there are disconnects that we hear about and see of that feuding and stuff. And I haven't seen this in any direct way, but I've talked to people that sons or daughters that cut their family off. Now, but not, that's interesting. Something came to mind as somebody I talked to recently, but not that way. I'm talking about in like they'll get in fights and out of spite cutting. Now, some people have to cut their family off, right? I mean, it's healthy.
Sure.
There are certain times it's healthy to just say, I don't have enough energy. I don't have enough.
Yeah. I had a professor that shared the phrase, sometimes it's better to be, how do you turn this phrase? Sometimes it's better to be from a broken home than to live in one.
Yeah, that's huge. And that's why I have great respect for those that can move on without cursing their family, right? Like there's a difference between saying, I just have to be different and I'll see you guys later, or we'll see what happens, or what have you. But I'm, having that boundary. And there's a difference between that and saying,
Sure.
to
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
everything, and
It's yeah.
hex on you and yeah. So
Being resentful and creating a boundary are two different things, and it's best not to confuse them.
yeah, because when you leave those avenues open, right? I think a lot of times, I was thinking about this today, as my father's getting on his age and he's acting as such in some ways. And I think sometimes, like, I could get really angry and just say F this, and shut it down, do it. Or I could just say, hey, let's work, okay. But let's keep these, let's keep the communication going, and let's keep the love flowing, right?
Keep building a
But
legacy.
keep building the legacy. And I think
And
about,
it's a relational legacy. I think, yeah, it's where we've kind of landed. I think in our conversation thus far is, yeah, this aspect of like almost like a relational legacy, and how do we build that?
time out from that real quick. Have you ever thought of taking some money, buying some gold, digging a hole, making a little map, hiding the map? Have you ever thought of Have you ever thought about doing something like that?
Okay. So no, but I'm starting to think about it now. Like, and I think there are several movies that are based around this motif, right? Of like, grandpa had this fortune, and
Yeah.
he hid it, and in his will, are the clues of the map, and you've got to go on this journey, to find the treasure. But really, the story is healing old wounds and growing together on this journey to find the treasure. Absolutely, yeah. It's not a bad
I'm starting
idea.
to think. I'm starting to think. Of course, as the times the way they are, I'm thinking a lot more about physical precious metals.
Sure.
And
Maybe you ought to go for
I thought,
silver. That's a little more reasonable.
yeah, it's a little more useful, eh?
Yeah. Affordable.
And oh yeah, affordable. And so I thought about just getting a bag of coins, putting it in. I have these little. When I was a kid, it was cool to have fake treasure chests. The little ones you put gewgaws in, and thought about just digging a hole, and but I haven't completely thought it out. So, but I said that to say, oh, what made me think of that is my family. When I went off to college, they moved into this farmhouse, and there was a real legend that the old man who had died there had hid a stack of cash somewhere in the house. Everybody had looked for it. Nobody had found it. And so every time I came home, I would spend, a portion of the time
Yeah.
just looking for loose boards, looking behind, picture frames, what have you. Because they left the house. When he died and he moved on, they sold the house. He still had like pictures of old pictures, Civil War pictures on the wall and stuff. They still had furniture left there. And so I'm like kind of trying to pull apart the couch,
lifting up the rugs.
for sure. Yeah, looking for loose threads. Treasure, man, treasure and legacy. There are a number of tropes that have been completely built on just that, the idea of a treasure. I mean, Scrooge McDuck is sort of that, is built on that flirtation with the idea of legacy, right? Like people want to, his nephews, or there's this thing where he's got this huge legacy. And then, through twisted events or adventures, they learn that the real legacy is loving their uncle. Uncle Scrooge, is that what he is? I don't know. Where have we gone?
Well, I mean, of all your trope examples, Scrooge McDuck would not necessarily.
Well, what one comes to your mind?
I don't know, but I think that was the first one that came to yours. So I'm
Yeah.
with you. No, I mean, ultimately, there is this aspect of the importance of relationship, right? I mean, like,
Yeah. Is it possible to leave a legacy without a connection? I guess so.
I think that's an interesting question. Is it possible to leave a legacy without some kind of connection? Or said differently, is it a legacy if there is no connection?
Right.
Like, certainly we benefit all the time from we benefit from the works of people who are no longer with us in the land of the living.
Right.
But we don't have a connection, right? So if we don't have a connection, is it really like it's a benefit, but is it a legacy?
Or even an alternate view of that would be the only thing that makes it any kind of a legacy is the connection we feel like we have with them.
Yeah.
It's with their personality and them. The thing that they left. Yeah. So Mark Twain, his legacy, sure, he left writings, but
you could develop a connection, right? I mean, like, you can develop a connection with a writer. You can develop a connection with an inventor. You can develop a connection with a thinker, or even post death.
Whose legacy do you think most about? Who's the first one that comes to your mind? So Mark Twain and Scrooge McDuck are the two that come to my mind.
Mark Twain and Scrooge McDuck, maybe not so much. That's interesting. I know I think we kind of got off on this topic, talking about, like where you were broadcasting from and your grandfather. I do think about, as far as like my own family. Yeah, I think my grandfather is probably the one that comes quickest to mind. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, he just does.
Can you leave a legacy if you haven't died?
I don't think so, sadly.
No.
I think we're building a legacy or creating a legacy, but it's only like passed on. Yeah, that was one thing I was looking at just before we jumped on. Like, it's testamentary. A legacy is really
it's an extension.
It really only comes into play like once you draw your last breath.
Wow.
And so,
I think that's right. Yeah. My grandfather, my granddaddy in particular, because I was wondering about it, because my tata, Ray Baca, on my mom's side, I feel like he has left a legacy already. And he continues to, well, I guess what you said, he's continuing.
He's still building it, right?
Yeah. He's still alive. Yeah. And it's still amazing. Like, we still talk about how he was, in his 70s and playing racquetball. But my granddaddy, he's the one a lot of people compare me to him because I have a split my teeth. I have a lot of physical features like him, the high cheekbones and dark eyebrows. When I see old pictures of him when he was young, he was in the Air Force. He just sort of, I guess I just sort of have a look about him. Although I'm fatter, he was a bit
thin
man. Yeah, he was a thin man. Yes, yeah. Working on that, but he, but yeah. So that's the legacy aspect of it, living up to the legacy. What does that mean? How do you live up to a legacy?
See, that's the part that maybe I tend to take a departure.
Mm,
Like I think we're so different as human beings that there's no, like, to hold ourselves to that standard just doesn't make any sense to me.
yeah.
Um, I mean, I can see.
Why not?
Well, yeah, just because of how unique we are, like it can be that can be a weight rather than
Mm,
you know. I don't know. I guess my fear around it is just that um, it can be very enslaving. You
yeah.
know, like my grandfather was a very hardworking man and
Mm,
a he had an eye for thinking ahead.
mm.
But he was also a large animal vet. you know, so it's kind of like, what part of the legacy, right, do you live up
You
to?
say a large animal guy? What does that
A
mean?
large animal vet. He was a veterinarian.
Oh, vet. Oh, vet.
Veterinarian. Now
Oh,
he also worked on small. He had a veterinary clinic, but the bulk of his work was cattle and horses.
hmm. Hmm.
Large animal vet
Yeah.
in the Panhandle of Texas. Um, so yeah, I mean, there are things like about him that, yeah, I certainly want to try to live up to, right?
Yeah.
But then it's kind of like, well, you need to go on your, follow your grandfather's footsteps, and it's like, I don't think I'm supposed to be a vet. Um, as an example of, like, living up to a legacy.
Well, that's interesting because that's something I struggled with a lot as when I was younger. And struggle, I don't mean it was a thought more than any kind of real anxiety. There was a little anxiety, but mostly thought. Like, why? Because both of my grandparents, who are legends in our families, were in the military, and my father was in the military and Vietnam. And so the question came to me often, should I go into the military? That
Hmm.
was a real question for me. Now, luckily, my father always celebrated, and my both my mother and my father always celebrated our differences. I particularly remember my father saying things like, because I played basketball. I was a basketball, small time basketball star in high school, and I just remember my dad saying, I would have I would have never thought I was never good at sports, and I love that about you, that you're so different from me.
Yeah.
And that was the sort of message that I heard regularly. Like, he was because my father's a philosopher and a poet as well, and he hated the military because as a poet, he was not a like a jock of any kind, that I don't know if that's what does better in the military, but according to him, he got out as soon as possible.
It just wasn't a good fit.
It wasn't a good fit. My brother went in, and I did feel like a little, somebody, one of us. Of course, now my brother's so anti-military and police that it's like, oh, hmm. So, but legacy, thinking about you, I agree with you that there shouldn't be that feeling like, because they did this, it's up to you now. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's a mixed bag because there are, again, tropes, right? Like
Yeah.
in movies and stories about, following in these legacy types esque like footsteps. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I don't think we should necessarily squander, right? Like these examples that have been given to us, or if that legacy is necessarily in the form of wealth, like
Yeah.
tangible financial wealth. Um, that probably would not be prudent and wise either.
Yeah. And the thing I'm struggling with most immediately is the idea of, to go back to what you were saying about what do you leave? Being in the house that my grandfather built, with the wealth that he didn't. It wasn't privilege. He was, he went from having no shoes, working his patoot off, to being able to build a house that, in a beautiful place that we now that I get to, find respite in for a while. And so that makes me think, or at least it motivates me. I think you're right that it doesn't make me feel like, well, now I have to do that, but it does motivate me to think, well, I can do that. He did it. I can do it.
Yeah.
And I would like to do it. Like in the
Yeah.
same way that I'm receiving this blessing, I would like to bless my progeny.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and it's like, the difference between a hand up and a hand out.
Tell me about that. What's
well,
that?
I mean, that aspect of like, legacy serves to lift you up. Like legacy serves to help you along, as opposed to just simply, a more hedonistic and short term.
Yeah.
Focus on pleasure, I suppose. Something that's immediate and not.
It's constructive rather than
exactly constructive, as opposed to just being consumed.
Yeah, consumptive. Yeah, constructive versus consumptive. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And I did grow up seeing, so that's another thing I remember is the grandparents. Oh, they weren't the sort of grandparents that would show up with money. Although sometimes they would, but
yeah, it's your grandparents.
But we didn't look forward to them coming because of the money or because of the goodies they were bringing, but because we enjoyed their presence. We enjoyed them and their love. And that's the thing with the relational thing, the relational legacy, being able to pass on love that people know you loved. Because when you think of Scrooge, I don't know, I keep coming back to Scrooge, but when you think about people that leave monetary legacies, it's always in contrast to what could have been, right? Like in spite of them being evil people, they left this legacy, right? Well, have you seen, I don't know, have you checked out what's it called, Cobra Kai?
Yes,
you have.
I have.
All right.
I did watch me some Cobra Kai.
Have you gotten to the part where you get to know his stepdad?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a good example of somebody who's, I mean, he's not dead yet, but it's somebody who it's a
yeah. I don't want your money.
Down.
I wanted a relationship. I wanted your love.
Yes.
I wanted your like emotional support.
Yeah, and that's a common trope, right? Is that the
yes.
people, I don't want your money, I want your money type thing. I wanted, where were you?
Yeah, where were you when I needed you?
Yeah. Which is, hey, good news for me. I don't have a whole lot of money, but man, I got a whole lot of hugs.
Got a bunch of hugs and a bunch of love.
Is that enough though for you? Because it's not enough for me. Leaving behind hugs is not good enough for me. Although I do hope to leave when I die, people say, my children in particular say, he was loving.
Yes. I think it's a good start. It's definitely a good start.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, I know for me, like just trying to reevaluate, like if I were to die in the very near future, like what would I leave behind?
Yeah.
And kind of, seeing what could be left behind and then removing my living self from that and going, well, what's left? And going, I would like to leave more.
Yeah.
I'd like to leave a little bit more impact.
What is that? Like, what is that impact that you'd like to leave?
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, and I think I know for me, it's kind of like an exploration of my own foibles and failures.
Mm,
Of leaving more of a spiritual legacy for my children, and maybe even an intellectual legacy.
mm,
Like there are aspects of love of learning that I think they, I hope that they get
mm.
from living in my house. Um, but I realize that I probably don't take as much of an advantage of the opportunity to have conversations with them or to share things with them.
Mm,
Maybe I'm hoarding it up to myself a little bit.
mm.
Um, yeah. Uh,
And as a father, it's easy. I'll say for me, it's easy to have plenty of time, right?
sure. Yeah.
I I remember a very, I remember this very clear, sort of heartbreaking, but I remember this very clear moment. Annalise was 3 years old, and she's my oldest. And I went to this men's retreat, and they were talking about leaving or writing out a blessing for your daughter. They were talking to me, write out a blessing. And I remember one man, just I looked over at him. He said, "My daughter's already 12," and it just goes like this. Wish I had done that.
Hmm.
And now my daughter's 12, and it went. I'm that man
Yeah.
already.
I'm
I
that man
remember
at the
looking at
retreat.
him. Yeah, I remember looking at him, thinking, "I'm gonna be him." You know, I don't know if I thought soon, but it went like that, and that's what he was saying. And I got it for the moment, but I didn't do anything about it. Well, I did some things, but I don't know if I did enough, you
Yeah.
know.
No, I hear you. It's we could talk about it a lot. We can think about it a lot, but what's going to matter is what we did. Like
Yeah.
what's the action? What are we doing?
Okay, well, let's talk about that in a practical way.
Yeah.
What are things that we should be doing with our daughters and sons, our
Um,
our
well,
progeny?
yeah, certainly if we're working hard and being frugal and thrifty, I suppose we will leave them some form of wealth. Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, I figure best case scenario, and they've already, thankfully, at least some of them have well, the youngest one, who's 6 and doesn't read, says that she wants my books. So,
Wow,
whether or not that goes anywhere, she's got
that's
she's got first dibs. Um,
nice.
I'm really a big fan of, and in various parts in the past, I've been better at this than I think maybe in the last year or so. Um, Being very intentional about creating experiences and having shared experiences. Like we went hiking this weekend with a buddy of mine and his daughters. So I mean, things like that. I do have a love for the outdoors.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's
it's
good.
yeah, uh, yeah,
Wow,
just doing.
there. I read something that when you go on vacation, this is like some of those, like, yeah, I don't know. Hey, Norbert. Let's see, Norbert checking in. Drew Mays. Thanks for the thumbs up. But I read something that said when you go on vacation, if you want it to be meaningful,
Hmm.
do not spend it indoors. That if you spend your vacation, the moments you remember the most are the ones that you spend outdoors. And it's some kind of weird phenomena, psychological phenomena. Maybe. I think there's a spiritual aspect. Whatever it is, I so that's interesting that you say that, because it's important to create these memories outdoors. There's something
It's
I don't
just
want to
time,
get.
and that's a hard thing. I think it's just time and effort. Um, you
Mm,
know, Hindsight, I probably wish I had taken more pictures.
mm,
I've not been a big picture taker,
mm,
I suppose. Um,
mm.
yeah, hindsight, I think that would have been wise. Since
That's
since since we have that technology, like that ability to create, and capture moments.
That may be an anachronistic thing, though. An anachronistic
An,
thing.
an anachronistic thing? Taking pictures? The
Pictures,
photo taking?
it may be it may be because we're gonna have so many pictures. Like our kids are gonna have so many pictures of us, and Facebook and what have you, that it may be the ones that have the memories. That treasure those.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like I
guess that's my thing. It's like memories that go with those pictures, right? Like not my headshots. Not that I necessarily have any of those. They're not going to remember. I remember when he made those headshots. Those were good headshots. We had a lot of fun.
You mean selfies?
Or selfies, yes, and also the selfies. I'm not a big selfie person, so there might be an Indeed headshot. Now my wife took that one, but it's still.
I don't want to skip over what you said there. That is extremely important to me about the reason going outdoors is so meaningful is because of the extra effort.
Okay, I hear you. The extra effort, yeah.
That's what you said, right? I thought that's what you were saying.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, putting in the time and the effort.
The time and effort, and it takes more time and effort to go outside.
It does. It does. Like we had an hour drive, up to the mountain, up on Clinch Mountain, and all along it's kind of like, well, where are we going? It's like, well, we're going to go for a hike. Well, what are we going to see? And it's like, I'm not even going to try to explain it to you. You just got to see it.
Yeah. Well, the difference between saying, "Hey, I got to make a memory," "Hey, what do you want to watch?" Between that and saying, like, "All right, let's make a memory. Come on, get your coat."
That's true. Yeah.
We're gonna drive.
They'll remember this trip. They won't remember the movies that we sat on the couch and watched. Yeah. That's a fact.
That's important. That's important. I need to think about that because even just the extra effort it just takes to go outside and play a little soccer game or a little
while we're talking about, like, this is an interesting, I've not really given a lot of thought to this issue or this idea of memory and being outside and effort. But now that I'm you've kind of spurred me thinking through, like flipping through my mental memory Rolodex here.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember. I may not be able to remember all the times I went fishing with my dad, but I remember a lot of them vividly. I remember every time we've been hunting vividly. Yeah. Gone canoeing vividly. Camping vividly. Vivid memories. Not just like, oh yeah, I remember we did that, but like you can roll the tape, right? Like you can remember significant parts of it, or at least I can. But I've never really given that a lot of thought. Like right. I can remember some conversations with my dad. Some of those might have been, heated, and I don't want to remember that.
That's true too, though.
That's true.
We leave. You're right, though. Every single time, and we lived outdoors for most of my life, or early life, I should say. But you're right. The days indoors pass so fast and are indistinguishable from each other that it's like when we went outside, those times we spent in nature, in adventure, the venture, the risk involved, however on the spectrum of risk it was. I remember this one time where my back was covered with mosquitoes and I was just trying to take a pee in the morning. My dad was just wiping the mosquitoes off my back.
Wow.
Like that is a vivid memory that I'll always have, but of protection and of danger, not, I'm just going to die, but I wasn't going to feel good.
No.
Yeah. That's interesting. Outdoors. It's interesting as you and I are going to be taking a little trip outdoors next weekend.
We're going to have to make some memories.
That not so much the legacy yet. Well, I don't know. So the other vivid memories. Now, so the other thing is the ones that were the memories that we relay become a legacy too, right? Like not everything that we leave behind is one true, or two experienced by firsthand.
Sure.
And those two sort of go, as we talked about memory last time.
I caught a fish this big. No.
Well, you know what's funny?
You weren't there, but let me tell you the story about the time I caught a fish this big.
Well, so one of the greatest memories and one of the legends of my life is best told by, so I lived out in Montana with two brothers, two of three, the Stimes. I don't know if you ever met them, but legendary family in our life, just like best friends. But one was out trekking across South America, and I went and lived in the woods with the two younger ones, very good friends, Bjorn and Luke. And at one point, we killed a deer with our car and an adze axe. But the story, we barely told the story, and maybe not more than that. But Sam was the oldest, and he came to visit us and heard the story and continued the story. He would tell everybody about our adventure. Like, these guys killed, and when I heard him tell it, I thought, well, that's
wasn't quite. Well, yeah, guys, just roll with it.
I mean, we did kill a deer, and we did use our car that had a sword, a sword that was coming out the front. We were actually trying to hit deer to kill them and eat them using the car. And we did take an adze axe to the deer after we hit it. However, his elaborations were amazing. Like, it was a young deer, he was saying like a 6-inch buck, and it was, nearly gutted them with, I don't know if he went that elaborate, but the way he tells it, I was like, wow. Oh yeah, that was us. Oh yeah, it was kind of like that. But so legend, the difference between legend and legacy, similar words there.
They are similar words.
Legacy. Is it your hope to leave a legend?
I was about to say, I'm probably only a legend in my own mind. No, I don't. At best, now I'm going to do a fun turn of phrase. At best, I hope that, if my life is a legend in any ways, it's just like the little, the legend key at the bottom of the map that helps explain some things. That's about it. Like that's as good as I want to get.
Well, that's pretty good. I like that. You want to be the legend on a map.
Yeah, that just kind of explains what's on the map. Yeah, that'll be as good. That'll be good enough for me.
I mean, yeah, it's funny you say that, because you were a legend at Toccoa. You were only there for, I think, a semester, right?
A year.
Were you there a year? I think you were only there a semester.
No, it was a year. Yeah, your freshman year. Okay. Yeah, your full freshman year.
But it
just went by so fast it only felt like a semester.
But you continued on without being there.
I could have been dead.
Some thought you were.
Yeah, I didn't make it back.
But I knew you weren't. I got to visit you. I remember the first time meeting your father, actually, when we went to
down to Florida.
In Florida, went down to Florida, and I thought, Josh looks a lot like his dad.
Yeah, he does. he looks more and more like his dad. every year, except for his mother's side of the family is got the male pattern balding.
Hey, I'm not far behind. I hear you.
No.
But legend and legacy. I want to come back. We don't have very much time, but I want to come back to the idea of spiritual legacy. What does that mean, and how do we cultivate that? Because we talked about going outside and creating memories and creating love and relationship and meaningful things. And then there's the idea I've struggled with since my kids were young, very young, is that I will not be able to control, or I will be able to influence to some extent their relationship with Christ. But I'm worried, that my influence will, I don't know that I know I can influence them. I just don't know how much I can control that influence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a shaky thing. What are your thoughts on our spiritual legacy for those that come after us?
That's a good question. I know you've got to bounce at 8:30.
We'll make it 8:40.
Well, what time is it now?
8:45. It's 8:35.
Oh, okay. Well, I what I'm going to propose is that
10 more minutes. Oh, okay. Well,
that we pick up on that subject next week.
Okay. Spiritual legacy.
Building a spiritual legacy. Developing a spiritual legacy. What is that?
What is developing a spiritual legacy? I think that's a really place to go. Because I think it's going to take some time of thought, and we can talk about it. We can develop a little bit.
We may have to talk about that more
over a little campfire action. Well, thank you, everybody. Once again, thanking Norbert and Drew and Scott. I thought a lot about you, Scott, during this. I had a good discussion with Scott, and it's stuff that we talked about, but a lot of things that I thought about during this, maybe things that we can get into as we talk about our spiritual legacy, about how to distinguish ourselves. What happens when we have, and this is not about Scott, but it came to my mind. What happens when we don't have a spiritual legacy, that we're feeding off?
Yeah.
Because I don't personally know that, but can you speak more to that? You think you'll be able to speak more to that?
Sure. Oh, yeah. Maybe this could turn into a multiple.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah. From the negative to the positive, we're going to talk about
and everything in between.
Everything, the whole spectrum. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Josh. It's been a pleasure as usual. And thank you guys for liking, viewing, and sharing. Not a lot of people left it. Let me check real quick. No comments, but
comment free.
Leave a comment. Yeah. We'll come back next week, Wednesday nights. We'll talk to you later.
Y'all be good.